my name's Jody, and I'm one of the pastors on staff here at The Ridge, and I'm grateful to be with you as you're really on a journey to figure out what it looks like to invest in the people around you who may not know Jesus yet. And it's a pretty humbling thing to think about. I mean, just how Jesus really can and does use each one of us to build his kingdom. We just have to step in and say yes, and that is exactly what you're learning to do right now. It is a big deal, so just congrats on making it this far. Well, in our previous video, you were introduced to a concept that can help us naturally and relationally invest in our ones. We learned that God says we are blessed to be a blessing, but what's that mean in like a practical sense? Well, it's like God telling us, hey, all those things that I've done for you and all the ways I've shown up in your life and all the gifts that I've given you, I don't want you to keep them for just you. I want you to use all of that stuff to go bless somebody else. God's encouraging us to just not overthink it. You see, we don't have to be fake. We don't have to be weird. Just use what you've already got to bless the people that you've already got around you. Well, as we looked at the life of Jesus and the Gospels, we see 5 everyday ways that Jesus loved his neighbors. And we've said that these 5 practices form the acronym BLESS. Now, as a reminder for those who missed it, I want to give you just a quick recap of those 5 BLESS practices, because really these ideas are the keys to learning to invest in the people all around you. Okay, so here we go. First up is B, which stands for begin with prayer. Jesus modeled this for us throughout his entire ministry, and we model him by doing the same thing for our neighbors and our ones. We show God we're serious when we ask him to provide opportunities within these relationships. Next up is L, and that stands for listen. This is something I see as really one of the most underrated qualities of Jesus. He asked amazing questions, and then he kind of just sat back and listened to the person that he was engaging with. And so often, it was a life-changing opportunity for that person. And when you really listen to someone, they feel valued. It really may be the kindest gift that you can give to anyone. Then E, and that stands for eat. Jesus liked to eat with people. He did it over and over. And actually, my favorite passage in the whole Bible is Matthew chapter 9, where we see Jesus eating, and not just eating, but with sinners and tax collectors. That meal shows the heart of Jesus so well. Eating together can take any relationship past the acquaintance phase and into one of friendship. And it works faster and better than just about anything else we can do. Okay, the first S in BLESS stands for serve, and we're going to talk more about this in just a moment, but the general idea is something Jesus made clear when he told us this. He said, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. The idea is that by the time you've prayed and listened and eaten, you probably are going to know enough about that person to have discovered how you can best serve them. And then the final S, which stands for story. When people were really ready to listen, Jesus would share his story. And doubting Thomas came to Jesus asking, for example, how can we know the way? Jesus answered with a story. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. See, over time, as you build relationships with people and bless them, you'll find that they actually want to know your story. And that is when you can tell them how the love of God is changing you. But do you see how it really is just a totally different opportunity when you do it when the right foundation has been poured first? That idea is just a total game changer. Well, right now, I want to focus in more with you on the first S in the BLESS acronym, and it's this idea of serving your one. And like so many other things, we get a better idea of what this can look like in reality by looking at the example that Jesus set for all of us. He made it pretty black and white when he said this, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And you see, our goal is just to imitate Jesus and to serve our ones in both meaningful and practical ways. Both of those are key. So let's take a look at how Jesus did it. One of the most profound serving examples Jesus gives us is when he's with his closest followers, and it's just prior to his crucifixion. Jesus knew his arrest and he knew his death were both coming. And what he did that evening in the upper room, it overturned a lie that had just plagued humanity since the fall in the Garden of Eden. It's this lie that says, if you want to be blessed, you look out for yourself before anybody else. Now, if any of us were in his spot, we may fall into that selfish mindset. We'd be worried about the physical pain ahead or the emotional stress and the terror, quite honestly, that's coming. But But Jesus isn't focused on himself. He's focused on the men that he'd come to do life with and really just making sure they had a final chance with him to really get it. John, Jesus' close friend and one of his disciples, was in the room that night, and he described it this way. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing, and he wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water in a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. It's pretty much impossible for us to understand how much this simple act of washing feet would have just shocked everybody in the room. Now, keep in mind, these disciples, they are in the middle of this culture that is pure honor and shame. That's their filter for everything. And protecting your reputation, protecting your dignity, man, it is beyond critical. And there you have Jesus, God in the flesh. There's nobody higher, nobody with more power, and he's doing the job of a servant. And hey, even if you're in that room and you don't fully understand who Jesus is yet, you're still going to know that he is this highly respected man, leader, and rabbi. And there is just no way anybody in that room would have seen this coming from Jesus. And that's why Peter is pretty much like offended when he responds to Jesus this way. He says, "No, you shall never wash my feet." And I love Jesus' reply. He just kind of must have shifted his tone, at least in my mind he does, to show patience. And just a complete counter to how offended Peter probably was, right? Jesus says to Peter, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." And it's like he's saying, hey, my serving you is about more than just serving you. Then Lord, Peter responds, it's like, okay, now I get it. Not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. You know, what I want to drive home here is this. What Jesus did in that upper room that night wasn't just a kind gesture. It was really meant to catalyze an entire movement. And the Gospel of John continues this way. It says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place and he said, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Jesus' message is pretty simple. It's your turn. Go. See, we live in a world that believes power and influence and wealth are a means to getting others to serve you. But Jesus, he just flips it all. He's as countercultural today as he was 2,000 years ago. So let me ask you, what do you need to put down to bless someone by serving them? What's your crown? Maybe it's your time or your pride, convenience. Have you been sucked into this sin of selfishness that has you worried first and always about what you need to look out to do for you or your family and do it before anybody else factors in? And what would it look like for you to put on an apron like Jesus? You know, where is it that you need to step in and serve somebody? These everyday ways to love your neighbor really can change the world. And they're not just for somebody somewhere. You can start. And you can do it with the people you interact with every day. It may be somebody who lives across the street or in an apartment across the hall. Hey, maybe it's the parents on your kid's sports team or somebody you always end up in line with at a coffee shop or at the gym. You know, I'm convinced that when you begin with prayer and listen and share meals with people, more opportunities to serve than you can count are going to present themselves. You know, when my husband and I first started to be more intentional with this idea of serving the people around us, I was really afraid. I was afraid I wasn't going to know what to do or even offer to somebody. And it was my version of this selfish theme popping up again. And you know what? That has literally never, ever happened. You know, by the time enough of a relationship has been built up where it's even appropriate for me or for us to offer to serve somebody, God has just used all of these past conversations to make it perfectly clear where and how we need to serve. Well, what did it look like? For a season for us anyway, it looked like us buying a lot of extra waffles each week. And we opened our home to some neighbors who they just needed help getting their kids fed and on the school bus in the morning. You know, now listen, it was not easy to get up extra early or to control this chaos of all of these kids in our house. at the crunch time of breakfast and getting on the bus. But here's the deal. My husband and I both had some flex in our schedules, and God gave us just this really clear way to serve these families. And like I said before, when we serve others, we want it to be meaningful and practical, and this was. And when we first offered to help these parents, we're kind of in disbelief. They're like, who would do something like that? And my husband and I, we just kind of smiled and looked at each other and were like, yeah, exactly. There were a few times they even asked us why. And when you serve your ones, someone may eventually ask you what makes you different or why you serve the way that you do. And then you can put into action the fifth and final blessed practice, which we're actually going to talk about in our next video. But for now, here's the next step we want you to take. After listening to your one and eating with them, we want you to identify the best way you can serve them, and then go do it. Right after this video ends, we've got some questions for you to process through this idea a little bit more of serving, either on your own, maybe you're going to talk about it with your group, that's awesome. I want you to really challenge yourself, not just by participating in the discussion itself, but by creating a plan and then holding yourself accountable to really and truly serving your one. See, as we follow Jesus, practicing what he modeled for us is mission critical to looking, loving, and living more like him every day.